Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, we're talking Sweet Smell of Success.
Well, we are so excited to do this episode. Tom, didn't you have such a great time covering Chulas Fronteras last week? Wasn't that so great?
I really did. I got so deep into loving Chulas Fronteras that it almost feels like 8 months has passed.
Yeah. No, I mean, and we,
I've lived a whole life in this week.
It's incredible. I mean, I really enjoyed, we didn't have this on mic, but I had so much fun afterward talking with you and saying, the two things I know for sure is that I am not going to have any problem keeping up with all of my work and doing wedding planning. It won't overcomplicate it at all. And the other thing I know for sure is that the Strait of Hormuz will always be open. Those are the two things, and I'm saying it all the time, and you know it, and both of these are true.
He's saying it all the time, and it's catching on. It's catching on with the kids down at all your local watering holes.
Yeah.
They're just talking about the Strait of Hormuz and then going right into the cornhole, and it's just fine.
I'll tell you what I can't wait for. Now, literally a week after we recorded Chulas Fronteras, I am so excited for the final season of Stranger Things. There's no way they fuck it up. No way they're gonna land that plane.
There's no way a show that deeply personal and singular and auteur driven is gonna end up feeling like AI driven slop. There's no way. I'm just saying there's no way it happened.
No way. Absolutely no way. I
can't wait to see the feeling of finality and consequence in this show, where you feel like, oh man, these kids went through some shit. Some of them died, and they learned some things.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going to change the landscape. I think it's going to give people a whole new view on what Netflix shows can be.
Yeah, and the one thing I can say is not to get too, we've still got an episode to do, but just right now here in 2025, a week after recording Chulas Fronteras, the one thing I'd say is I'm really looking forward to 2026. It's tough right now. Everybody's feeling tough right now, but I just feel like next year, in 2026, it's all going to be looking up. I can't imagine things getting
There's
worse.
No way things can get harder than they were in 2025.
No.
Last
time I went to the gas station, I was paying close to $3 a gallon.
Oh,
Could you imagine?
Listen, the Strait of Hormuz is staying open. There's no way oil's getting higher.
And we say this all the time.
All the time. I'm literally, every time I get sniped in Battlefield, instead of reverting back to the high school slurs that we would scream in video games, I'd say, the Strait of Hormuz is open! Fuck!
So, we are here.
I can't wait to meet my new goth mommy, Varang in Avatar in a few weeks. It's going to be great. We're going to keep talking about Avatar 3.
Absolutely.
It's going to run train at the Oscars.
I'm just so worried about you. Speaking of the Oscars, I'm so worried about you because you had such a hard time watching Wicked, and Wicked for Good on track to pull a record number of nominations. So you're going to have to watch it.
It's really going to be a case of pulling teeth at the theaters again. 2 years in a row, they're punishing me for the Oppenheimer Honora twofer that happened. They're going to be like, we're going to tickle your balls by making you think Sinners might get nominations this year because it's getting stuff elsewhere. No.
Come on.
It's a horror movie with black folks. We got to give it to Wicked. BAFTA-nominated Wicked. NAACP award nominee Wicked for Good because, if you have a Cynthia Erivo, you are a black movie.
And I mean, that's the thing, Tom. I mean, I would love, again, here we are in 2025, a week after recording Chulas Fronteras. I would love...
It's been a week.
I would love if Sinners got some Oscar nominations, because the one thing I can tell you is that if it did squeak out a single nomination even, the fans would be like, God, we're so lucky that it worked out like this. And you know what? We're going to be super chill about all this. We're not going to look this gift horse in the mouth.
A week since Chulas Fronteras.
a week since Julius Fronteras. All our tech is working great because
All our
why
tech
wouldn't
is
it be working great?
fine.
We just used it last week.
And listen, it's not like there's been enough time in the week since we recorded Chulas Fronteras for there to be iOS updates or anything that would cause
No.
absolute nonsense for our computers or our phones or even our headset.
No.
Everything is fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I foresee us being clear of all Epstein-related issues in the year 2026. Everyone will agree on that's the line, the demarcation line, much like the line that makes the Strait of Hormuz on a map.
Clear and open.
Clear and open, and just no Trumps allowed.
This is just clear shot through the Strait
Clear
of
shot.
Hormuz. It's all doing
much
great.
like it was a clear shot from us recording Chulas Fronteras.
Yes.
To us recording this episode, which
Absolutely.
is Sweet Smell of Success.
Absolutely.
And
Let's
it's a description
talk
of our
success.
It is a description of our recording schedule. If somebody said, how would you describe how these guys record their show? Someone say, just smells like success, man.
And the other thing is, we're talking about a New York movie, right?
Yes.
Talking about a New York movie, and I don't want to call any shots for what I think is going to happen in, a couple weeks from now, but I think we're all pretty clear Andrew Cuomo's cruising to a victory as the mayor of New York City at this point. So, worth just trying to call our shot.
I think this is just a thing we're going to have to fight to until the election results come in. I still think Sliwa's got it.
Sliwa's got it.
I think he's got it in the bag. I think he's got it in the bag.
Definitely got it in the bag.
I think he's got it in the beret. Let's be real here.
This is true. So anyway, here we are a week after Chulas Fronteras to talk about the sweet smell of success.
And how sweet it is.
So I guess I want to start honestly by talking about because we obviously don't have a guest here or anything like that. Tom, when was your first time seeing The Sweet Smell of Success?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I want to say it might have been college, maybe high school, but around that 18 to 20 age range. It definitely wasn't in school or anything, but I remember being in school, having my first job, and that's when I started collecting discs and stuff. And Sweet Smell of Success was one of the earlier Criterion Blu-rays that I bought. And I remember picking it up and watching it and being like, oh, wow, this rocks. And then we did watch it in a class in college. And I was like, oh, I've already seen this. This is cool. Let me watch it. I could get to watch it again. And it just rocked my shit. The first time I saw it. It's great every time I see it. I know you know this about me. I don't remember how many times I've said it on the show. I have a very very, very soft spot for journalism movies, the light or the dark side of journalism, but they always just tend to get their hooks into me. And this one really was something. And I do think this is one of those early movies in my burgeoning my film fandom of trying to branch out and watch other stuff, other eras and whatnot, that makes you go, oh, we're not really being given the exact sense of what old black and white American movies could be. Not to say that this was indicative of everything in the 50s, for sure. That's a big part of this movie's backstory, is that it was an absolute bomb at the time it came out. But the fact that it could have come out was sort of a mind-opening thing of, oh, okay, so maybe there are other movies like this that snuck through the cracks, or other movies similar to this that did maybe have an element that was able to push them into success. A movie that I tend to think of in pairs with this movie is Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole. Another movie, dark side of journalism, bombs when it comes out, hailed as a classic today, Criterion Collection, all of that stuff. But this I do have to credit as one of those early movies to really let you into what older movies could be, because it still has that old movie sensibility where this is a lot sleazier than a lot of 50s movies, but it still has to dance around things and not really say what's going on. You get a good enough sense, like, all right, I get it, but they have to dance around. They can't really show you a lot of stuff. And the way they talk, there's that very 50s dialogue. Even though this is very well written, feels like just unbelievable stuff. Feels like a stage play, but it's got that. Oh, well, you see, I wouldn't want to take a bite out of you. You're like a cookie full of arsenic. It's like, okay, they still got that thing going on, but it helps you get into that and understand it, because it is a good middle ground. Um, a lot of it due to the real world feeling that the New York shooting brings to the entire enterprise, even though there's interior stuff which is clearly shot in sound stages and what have you or whatever. But God, those shots of Tony Curtis just walking around 1950s New York is just insane, and really just takes it apart from so many movies of the time. And fuck, even today, we bemoan so much now about the overuse of CGI and green screen and the volume and whatnot, where anytime a movie even takes the fucking smallest effort, like remember when Eternals came out, and people were like, oh wow, she made like a push to like shoot on a beach, and we're like, we really got to give people a pat on the back for fucking shooting on a beach, and we got to give Feige like a pat on the back for letting her go to a real fucking beach, where this is like, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's an important movie to me. I do have to say, and it's one that I try not to overwatch and like to keep it sort of fresh every time I get to it. But man, like every time you watch it, it is just it's just a breath of fresh air, and it's so gleefully cynical and nihilistic, and yeah, I love it. What about your first time with this movie?
Well, I'm about to tell you, Tom, a story I haven't told you in the almost 18 years of us knowing each other. You've never heard this, believe it or not. So I've been saving it for now. The first time I saw it, or the first time I started to watch it, I turned it off probably after about 30 minutes. I thought it was deeply, deeply boring because it wasn't funny at all. And the reason for that being, I was probably around like 11 years old or something like that. And I got the idea in my head that this movie was A, a comedy, and B, possibly a Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis movie. The reason for that.
What did your dad be like? Oh, Sweet Smell of Success. It's so funny.
No. Okay, I'm actually. So, do you remember the Farmingdale Multiplex, in Airport Plaza? And I don't know how often you went there as a kid, but for a very long time, they used to have like old Hollywood decor, right? Mm-hmm. They used to have that big neon sign with like King Kong on it and everything. And then if you went to like theaters 1 through 10, I think it was, on that side of the theater, as you walked past it, there was a giant poster for Sweet Smell of Success. Do you remember this?
That I don't remember. I remember everything else, but that I don't.
So check your phone in a second. I'm about to text you this. I'm texting you this poster that I am also going to put on the video for people watching on video. But it was. I'm not saying like, and I'm looking at the poster now, and it does in fact it does say Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster. So I definitely should have picked up on that as a youngin', that it was the two of them. But like, let's see if it goes through. If not, I'll pull it up on my camera. But for whatever reason, this poster just looked to me like a 50s like office comedy. Did it go through for you? Do you see it?
Yeah, it looks like Lancaster's about to slap Tony Curtis.
Right. And I think like for whatever reason, it kind of, again, it had the energy of a Jerry Lewis Dean Martin movie, right? Like the poster, like it looked like some of those. And then even probably by that point, I would have recognized Tony Curtis, not Burt Lancaster, but I would have recognized Tony Curtis. And I'm like, Tony Curtis, I know him. he's from Some Like It Hot. He's in that racing movie with Natalie Wood. Like, he's a funny guy. So I rented it from Blockbuster. And also the title. You hear the title and you're like, oh, of course. That's like, I think I might have also gotten it conflated with How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Right? Because again, it's a similar sounding title.
Like it'd have a Dean Martin like theme song. Sweet smell of success.
Right. Like, it's so much, So I remember like renting it like on VHS tape, watching it, and kind of like, that thing you do when you're a kid and somebody tells you like, oh, like this is a funny movie or comedy movie or whatever, and the jokes don't land for you because it's like an adult comedy, right?
Yeah.
It's like if it's
still happens today.
And you're like, but like when you're a kid, you do the thing where you're like looking for stuff to laugh at, right?
Tony Erdmann.
Yeah. We saw that together.
And we both
at a theater that doesn't exist anymore.
And we both walked out together, confused.
I mean, I liked it more than you, but I think we were both just like, I was told this is just like rolling in the aisles stuff.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be
really
running around the theater firing 6-shooters in the air. And I was just like, how quaint.
Yeah. But so I remember renting it then and kind of like getting like 30 minutes into it and kind of just like not vibing with it, right?
Yeah.
And then I watched it again when I got to college, right? It was one of those ones where like when I started film school, I was like, okay, I should give this one another chance. And, weirdly, even though I liked it a lot more then, I didn't fully click with it because I think that this movie deeply benefits from understanding who Walter Winchell was, right?
Yeah.
Or at the very least, even if you don't understand who Walter Winchell is, you need to understand that type of person who doesn't totally exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because the closest analog we had in our lifetimes were like the TMZ Perez Hilton types, right?
Yeah.
But there is an inherent sleaziness to that and an inherent low classness to that I don't know, it doesn't have the same thing, right? Whereas Walter Winchell was at least relatively like respected before his downfall. You know what I mean? Like there was some degree of seemingly class to it.
There is no equivalent anymore. I guess for a while you could maybe make the argument that like Twitter was kind of filling that void of the sort of like if you get, on the wrong side of Twitter and you get, I hate to say the word canceled or whatever, like the tide will then turn on you and it's like, oh, got to deal with this now.
But that's the thing. That's a mob mentality.
No,
right?
yeah,
Whereas
that's there's no one person. And who was the because there was the woman writer,
Hedda Hopper.
Hedda Hopper. There we go. So this was a thing, but it's funny how like the incessant need America has for gossip hasn't dissipated at all, but this kind of character just doesn't really exist because I don't think anybody other than the truly insane can tell you like specific personalities from TMZ because TMZ still exists.
Yeah,
but like even at the height of it, nobody was really going to be like, oh well, this guy broke the case. It's just like, no, TMZ's got pics of Hulk Hogan fucking someone.
Well, and it's also like it's a thing of it's so much more. You can't outrage people the same way.
Well, it's also more easily
or scandalize
accessible
people
now.
The same way. Well, yeah, but I mean, you can't even scandalize people the same way because it's like, there are still like places and papers that publish blind items, right?
Yeah.
And you can tell when they have an agenda. And, I mean, believe me, like even in my, in a former job that I had, because I no longer do this kind of work, like you would, if you ever brought up the royal family in any context, you had people who were like, well, I read here in this blind item that Meghan Markle was doing XYZ. And it's like, okay, man, you've found your sources that will tell you a fiction that you want to believe one way or the other. The same way, like when it comes to political reporting, like you can find places that will publish the fiction that you want to read, right? But you can't have the same, like there is no sort of like, I guess part of it with what we have in the Lancaster character in Sweet Smell of Success that we don't have now is like there is a shock to the idea that this man has a personal agenda to his reporting. And now there is no shock
everyone.
to be had with that. There is no like you just
everyone.
Assume. Yeah.
I mean, left,
it can't
right,
take somebody
or whatever,
down now.
Yeah, left, right, or center. Like everybody's got that. There is no pretense of journalistic integrity anymore or journalistic objectivity. It's just I have an agenda, and it's really finding who. So yeah, that's also definitely a. But it's funny though how it does, in that way, it has aged in a different way than they probably would have wanted to, because now it doesn't really play as a surprise. It now just plays as like I was thinking of like the Safdie movies that clearly they clearly love this movie about a guy clearly doing something wrong, clearly digging himself a hole, and this feels like now that we just can go into this world and we're not surprised that Burt Lancaster, J.J. Hunsaker, which what an incredible name to give Burt Lancaster to say.
Yeah.
I'm J.J. Hunsaker. Like we're not surprised anymore. So it's kind of that like slow rolling almost tragedy, even though we see that Tony Curtis is a piece of shit. But then he has these moments where like he sees a little bit of the light and then is pulled in and you're just like,
Well, actually, I'll say this, right? To the point of like the Walter Winchell, another element of why it, and you bring up the Safdies, jogged something in my mind, but not for the same reason you bring it up. It's the fact that like the whole thing about what a J.J. Hunsaker was, you have that moment, and then we'll play the registry clip. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but like you have that moment when he's on the phone, right? He's at the restaurant, Hunsaker, he's on the phone, and basically just goes like, I don't like this guy, whatever. And Tony Curtis goes, you just watched a man get sentenced to death, right?
Yeah.
Because Burt Lancaster was, or J.J. Hunsaker is a gatekeeper, right? Yeah. He is, if you want to make it in any of these businesses, there were gatekeepers who wielded their power indiscriminately. And we all decided that was bad, right? And I'm not suggesting guys like J.J. Hunsaker are good. But one of the issues that we are dealing with now in our current culture and for the last 10 plus years is the gatekeepers do not exist in any capacity anymore.
Oh,
right?
We let anybody have any opinion, say whatever they want, join any club, clique,
and
cult,
can be
whatever.
But not just that, like the people who create content, who create air quotes news or entertainment or anything, you used to have to go through certain barriers to do that. And while those barriers were certainly gatekeeping, part of that was, well, if I'm going to put you on the 5 o'clock news, I got to make sure you're on the up and up, because it's my ass if you say something bad. It's my ass if you lie. It's my ass if you whatever. And now we are dealing with the reality of, okay, it sucked that there were people like a J.J. Hunsaker or whatever who could take down these rising stars, if you will, in some way or another. And now there's no one who can do that at all, really. We had, as you mentioned, Tom, people getting canceled in like the 2010s and early 2020s. And unfortunately, what we learned from all that, or as we're learning in the last couple of years of some truly vile people coming back into the public sphere, you come at the king, you best not miss is really applicable in terms of like, we didn't really figure out what to do about this after that fact. And when you look at that and you keep that in mind, like that's a thing that I think, especially for younger people watching this, probably feels weird to even look at this and go like, well, what do you mean some guy had a newspaper column and he could say, well, this guy got caught with reefer in his pocket and his career's over. Like that no part of that makes sense. Because even if that's true, nowadays he would have a whole, countercultural rally behind him saying like, we actually think that's great.
Yeah, he'd be making movies for the Daily Wire. Like
yeah.
That's like it's there is no accountability. I mean, we make it's a dark subject, but like the Epstein stuff really was the line in the sand that we've basically crossed of just, there is no accountability. Like there is no, like nobody's getting canceled. Like nothing. There is nothing anymore that can happen. Unless you actually actively get sent to prison, there will literally be no stopping you from just coming back and just being like, hey, I'm here.
But that's also, you mentioned again the Epstein stuff of it all. Like part of that too is like, and you and I were talking about this privately, like about the idea of like, part of the problem with that is like, it's just becoming a cudgel by which people can like try and take swings at the people they want to take down. The idea of what J.J. Hunsaker does in the world of Sweet Smell of Success, right? This guy who basically uses innuendo and scandal to take out his petty vendettas on people. That's now just how everybody operates. That's now just how that, again, it's like, whether it's in entertainment or politics, like, I'm going to break kayfabe now and talk about this past year at the Academy Awards, when it was like, when all of a sudden people are having this discussion about like, well, did you hear Timothée Chalamet dismissed ballet? And did you hear that this person did this? And it's like very transparently efforts being made by publicists and people like that to kind of like jockey for a position in the Oscar race. Where it's like, I'm not saying Timothée Chalamet didn't say anything about ballet, but it's more so like, well, this is very transparently you trying to damage somebody's reputation. This is not sincere. You don't give a shit about this, really. You only give a shit about it because it's not your guy and you want your guy to win.
And
that's all it is.
They'll be back on the Timmy train once Dune 3 comes out, as everyone clearly, with their boners up when that Dune 3 trailer came out. It's like, so you guys really didn't care about this.
No.
The sanctity and respectability of opera and ballet. You just wanted him to not win because he didn't talk proper. Like you deemed him improper for an award because for whatever fucking reason. I mean, whatever. It's very funny in a arsenic laced cookie kind of way how this movie has aged, because obviously the media landscape has shifted in many ways, but it still exists, and there's still the need, this like almost drug addict need that people have for rumor and taking people down and all of that stuff that still exists. So while you might be able, if you show this to somebody that doesn't have the historical context that like we would have for these kinds of things, they could still at the end of the day, I think, get this sense of, oh, okay, so instead of like it being Twitter, it's one guy who has a TV show and a twice daily published column that became so popular that he can just at his whim just cut somebody's fucking throat in Times Square and nobody will arrest him for it.
So before we get any further,
let's play. Because we don't forget about doing this, because we recorded Trueless Fronteras last week.
That's right, kayfabe, back up, baby. Before we talk any more about Sweet Smell of Success, let's hear what the Library of Congress had to say. Here's what the National Film Registry had to say about Sweet Smell of Success.
Sweet Smell of Success. A powerful New York newspaper columnist, Burt Lancaster, is dead set against his sister, Susan Harrison, marrying a jazz musician, Martin Milner. A sleazy PR man, Tony Curtis, will do anything to get publicity for his clients, and he sees the columnist's situation as an opportunity to win his favor and sets out to break up the affair any way he can. The film was directed by Alexander McKendrick, a British director best known for comedies like The Ladykillers and The Man in the White Suit, from a script by Clifford Odets and Ernest Lehman. McKendrick and cinematographer James Wong Howe capture the pre-Beat generation era when jazz artists wear suits and ties, hair is cropped short, and everyone wants to appear cool.
There's so much of this. I mean, they mentioned, and I do want to take time to talk about Alexander McKendrick, because that's a wild thing. Like, it's crazy that the guy who made The Ladykillers and all of those Ealing comedies comes to New York, makes this film that is very unlike the Ealing comedies, and then makes like one or two more films and then stops. That is wild. There's so much wild. I also, Tom, I was looking over my notes that I took on this film. And by that, I mean the notes that I took last week in prep for this, and definitely not several months ago, and realized that I too compared Tony Curtis to Howard Ratner in Uncut Gems in my notes.
100%.
So, yeah.
Watching it today, I had such a rewatching it today before we recorded. I had such a strong sense of, man, this movie's really gonna feel like Marty Supreme when I see this in 2 months. There's
I heard you.
No way that,
I heard somehow you got your hands on a Blu-ray of it, which is crazy. Is that a screener?
Listen, guys, I know, just between us, we're all friends here. All 11 of you idiots that listen to us. I got my hands on this bad boy. Don't tell anybody. Hey.
Oh man! Wow. Wow.
But no. This is clearly a big influence on the Safdie stuff. Especially the street stuff they've done. Not a quality discussion, but this is not very much a Smashing Machine movie that was. There's no real connective tissue there, but Heaven Knows What, Uncut Gems, Good Time, Marty Supreme, those movies of just, we're shooting on the streets of New York. I'm not going to say the character in Heaven Knows What is a piece of shit, but Good Time, Pattinson, Sandler, Chalamet, these just shitty people that have these glimmers of humanity that keeps you enraptured enough to not want them to keep digging, but they just keep digging, and you're just like, fuck. Like the end of the movie, like towards the end when Tony Curtis is telling him, like, I'm not going to sick the cop on this kid. What are you, fucking crazy? Like, no. Even if you gave me a column, I wouldn't do it. And then you, like, when he says that, you just know, like, he's going to give him the fucking column, and he's going to take it, and he's going to sell his soul.
It's... to that point, though, Tom, you said there's not a Smashing Machine in this, and I would disagree insofar as, like...
Well, I did love the sequence in this movie where Jungle Land plays.
No, but the reason being, like, when I saw Smashing Machine, it was with a Q&A with Josh Safdie, and Benny, sorry. I was like in my head. Yeah, I was, and the thing is, I was in my head going, "Don't say Josh." I was at a Q&A with Benny Safdie. And he talked about, he goes, one of the things he wanted to do is, he goes, I wanted to kind of cut away from and cut out some of the stuff that's like the standard biopic stuff. Like, I don't want to show you him struggling in rehab. I don't want to show you his rise to the top. Like, I want to start at a moment where this guy's like, where basically, like, if I want this movie to feel like the crescendo already happened and we just chopped it all off, and we start with the downswing. And that mentality, no doubt, is influenced by this film, because this film, one of the smartest things about this film is that it does not do any of the stuff that like a screenwriting professor would tell you got to see. You know, apparently, like in an early version of the script, we saw Falco have a family, like a mother and a father and siblings, to kind of show his working class roots. And it was supposed to be like, you know, very a lot more like traditional screenplay. And then Clifford Odets came in and reworked the script, cut out the family, even did little things like when the lovers are supposed to meet, they're supposed to meet in a dressing room, he shifts it to an alleyway. Like, it was very much more like, no. I basically want this thing to be seedier, and also like, I don't want to show you any of we're not going to show the sister and the trumpet player falling in love. We are not going to show Tony Curtis having any highs. We're going to start with Hunsucker disappointed in him, right?
Yeah,
we're going to start with him having already fucked up. We're going to skip over all the big stuff. You know what I'm saying?
It's all, yeah, no, you put it that way, then yes, absolutely. I see and that's one of the things that I love about the movie, and which is a thing that I love about the Safdie brothers movies is that they're all very experiential. They're not about, and it's a thing that I think about too in my writing when I'm I'm writing scripts, is like you try to think of, I feel like a lot of movies, and not just today, just in general, it's a thing that sort of annoys me about movies, is that they tend to not think of, okay, well, who's the POV of this movie? And it doesn't have to just be one person, but you have to think like, well, who is it? This person? Is it these 3 people? Is it like Magnolia and it's 100 people? But you have to think like, well, what is the perspective of the movie? Okay, you go from there. What's the story of the movie? So in this, it's all right. The perspective is Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster, leaning more towards Curtis, but we'll get Lancaster stuff. All right, we get that. All right, what's the story? It's basically 24 hours of Tony Curtis trying to dig himself out of this hole because Burt Lancaster's sister / wife is in love with another guy, and they need to throw a monkey wrench into that whole situation. It's like, okay, so these two are the POV, 24 hours. All right, there is no fat. We're not going to, like you said, not doing the screenwriter thing of, oh, well, he's got 24 hours, so he's got to rush. But, you know, he'll take some time to go home and have dinner and, like, talk to his family. So you get to know him a little better. It's no. He only exists in this story. And I don't mean like, oh, like he's not a well-written character. No, he only exists right now dealing with this situation. And I love that. That is the Uncut Gems thing. That is the Good Times thing. That even the Smashing Machine thing. I'm going to assume the Marty Supreme thing. See it in a few months. But it's the Marty. It's you. I like when movies really do actually think through what's the POV of the movie. Who are we focusing on? And all right, so by thinking of that, we're not going to cut to random scenes of other characters that these POV characters wouldn't have these sequences. And no fat. I love that. Listen, I love a 3-hour movie. My favorite movie is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, obviously, but sometimes the fat is part of the charm, but a lot of times, and we see that nowadays, movies are way too fucking long these days. They're just trying to justify their expenses. And a movie like this is just like, no, you can just in 95 minutes, because it's 95 minutes.
Yeah.
It ends, and this is the time of, oh, I wish we could go back to this time, but we can't because of unions. Of when a movie ended, no credits, just the end, goodbye, fuck you. Go outside and smoke another pack of cigarettes because you already smoked a pack.
Smacked a poke.
Well, listen, that's what the Irish do.
That's I anticipate at some point in the course of my wedding that's happening 8 months from now, you will be so trashed you'll walk up and go, I'm gonna go smack a poke. And that will be before you have to deliver a speech. So we're in real trouble.
Oh yeah,
anyway.
you really made a mistake, buddy.
Poor choices made all around.
But much like the characters in this. But yeah, no,
right.
It's that thing that and it's a thing that I love about movies that I think even a Linklater's probably been influenced by movies like this. I feel like a Blue Moon probably has a little bits of elements of that in this.
Yeah.
You know, this sense of being able to just throw you into a world, have a time limit that it's not like 6 months or a year or whatever. It's like you got 24 hours in this world. The movie's 90 minutes. Go. You'll figure it out as you go. And I love shit like that because that's hard. Like, there's a reason why there are like screenwriting rules. It's because it's like it is kind of hard to just sort of like throw you into something and be like, figure it out as you go. Because if you miss this line of dialogue, you're not really going to understand why this thing happens later in the movie. Like, if you're not really paying attention to, when the cigarette girl is talking to Tony Curtis, you're like, well, why is she at his place here? And then you're like, oh, maybe you'll figure out like what's going on, but you're kind of missing something. But it's when like a movie like this, when they just get it, you're just like, fuck, this is a great piece of screenwriting.
Well, and the other thing too that I was thinking about watching it this time around is like talking about the screenwriting rules of it all and all that. Like, I think that, you know, a great moment, a really good moment in this film is, to mention the cigarette girl, when he's trying to blackmail the guy, right? And he's going up to him, he's mentioning cigarette. Well, and that's the thing, like, and it's a powerful moment, right? Where he basically tells him, like, no, and he tells his wife, and the wife tells him, like, that's the first upright thing I've ever seen you do. Now, most people writing that screenplay would they would get internal about it and kind of go like, okay, we want to have this really triumphant moment where somebody tells him, you know what, Tony Curtis, I'm not going to let you blackmail me. But to establish that, to set that up, we need to plant the seeds earlier. We need to show a scene of him successfully blackmailing somebody, so that then when somebody tells him no, it's going to feel, you know what I'm saying? Like, structurally, they'd be like, well, in Act 1, he has to successfully blackmail somebody. And then in Act 2, in contrast, and it's
all
like,
we see him do is not succeed. Like, that's like, he is like, he succeeds essentially, basically by the third act, by successfully getting the couple to break up, even though that then eventually is a failure because you know, they aren't taking the human element into account when he's pulling these schemes. But like, he doesn't successfully blackmail this guy. He basically loses a client as he walks into the club. The guy's like, oh, what am I paying you good money for? Oh, a little detail that I liked, and it's stuck in my head, and it's just one of those things that as a writer you try to think of, but was probably not thought of on the day, or maybe Odets really did just think like, oh, like, let me just figure out like little character beats. But when he's leaving his office in the beginning of the movie to go meet JJ at Club 21, and his secretary's like, oh, don't forget your top coat, and he goes, oh, what, so I could tip every coat check in the city? It's just like, what a great little way to be like, one, he's kind of a cheapskate, he's also broke, and he's kind of an asshole. Like,
and also, like, you can do that. You know, one of the things they teach you in film school, they always talk about show, don't tell, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's sometimes a mistake, because there are clever ways to tell us something without having to show us. And that line you mentioned with the with the top coat, right? And him talking about how I have to tip every coat check in the city or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Great. You've now, with one line, told us that this guy has had to deal with that before, right?
And that's just sort of like the world. That's like the world of like, you go to the club, there's a coat check, you got to tip. Otherwise, you're not a high society guy, and people look at. And he's so clearly, desperately trying to be a JJ Hunsaker, a power player. He wants to be this guy, no matter who he has to step on. It's just,
and a lesser film would have been tempted to. I made the comparison before about like movies that just like very clearly are like, wow, man, I saw After Hours. And like you would do, a lesser filmmaker would be like, oh, but we could get a really, a fun runner out of like every time he stops somewhere, he has to like tip the coat check guy, right? That's an extra layer to this of this crazy 24 hours. And it's like, we don't actually need to add anything to this stretch of time.
And like a lesser movie would have, these more humanizing elements. They would have made him like feel bad about not being able to do that. Like you would give him like he feels like the way he would deliver would be like, oh, and I can't tip anybody or something, and try to make him like, where it's just, no, this guy is just scum. He is unrepentant piece of garbage.
Or more importantly, I think even more than that, it's this guy is so far gone.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to show us his downfall. The way Tony Curtis plays this character, we're at the point, again, to evoke the Safdie smashing machine of it all, like, you don't need to show me this guy winning all the championships. I know enough now to know this guy's the best at what he does. So that when we start, we're starting from the premise of the guy who's the best at what he does is not allowed to do the thing that he's best at anymore. And where does that go?
And also, in this case, it's a sort of, I don't know if it's a show or tell in this situation, but by giving him the secretary, who's so nice and clearly bought into him being a good person at some point and can't let go of that belief, is all you need to know that, okay, at one point he wasn't this.
Yeah.
This did happen. He's now this guy. She can't see past it. And you feel bad. You're like, oh, come on, woman. Fucking enough already. Get away from this guy. You just see like, okay, he obviously wasn't this guy. And you do get the little bits at the end, before he dangles the column in front of him, or even like stopping the sister from committing suicide and being like, what are you doing? Like, this, even in his hard-nosed way, is like, you're 19. Like, why are you acting like this is the biggest fucking problem in the world? Like you, even in his hard-nosed way, you're seeing like there was something here, and maybe that is ultimately his downfall, is that he hasn't fully whittled that shit away, because JJ clearly has, and he may lose his sister at the end, but he's still fucking top dog of the city. Tony Curtis gets he gets the shit kicked out of him by the cops, and probably gets thrown in Rikers for who knows how fucking long on trumped up charges.
But at the same time, for how long does JJ Hunsaker?
Well, that's another thing. That's the thing about that's the thing about the aging of the movie thing that they probably couldn't have foreseen. But yeah, that does add an element for us watching it of, okay, he lost his sister, but okay, yeah.
Even in the time of even in the time of the film, insofar as what the sister's suicide ploy and Tony Curtis breaking and just telling the truth, right? What that tells us, even though Tony Curtis gets, the shit beat out of him, right? What that tells us is Hunsaker is encountering something here that he seemingly hasn't encountered in a long time. And it starts with the trumpet player. It starts with the boyfriend, which is like everybody else is afraid of Hunsaker, right?
Yeah.
And the boyfriend is the first one who's just like, no, fuck you. Like, I don't, and I don't have to respect you. I don't have to do what you say. I don't really give a shit. And so much of J.J. Hunsaker's power is given to him by people offering fealty because they want to get something from him, right? He offers them something. It's not dissimilar to, and this is all stuff that comes along later, right? But it's kind of like, it's not dissimilar to somebody like a Richard Nixon, right?
Yeah.
Where like at a certain point, Nixon became so toxic that his own party turned on him because the advantages he could offer were not as strong. People were willing to just say no. It's happening. I mean, it's in fact literally happening in our time, insofar as like truly, not to get too into contemporary politics, but like the reason that Donald Trump won the primary in 2016 is in part because he had the Fox News voice, right? he had sway over people, he had some influence, and then once he won, he became the power broker of the Republican Party, right? And when we looked at all of this shit, where like people, whether it was whatever it was, when people turned around and went like, well, why didn't this person say this? Why didn't this person? Because he had power, right? And his power was just that enough people were willing to listen to him to get something out of him, right? That enough people were willing to they didn't want to upset his fans. They didn't want to lose the donations. They didn't want to lose whatever, right? And yet, it only takes a little bit to show that these people are paper tigers, you know? It really only takes a little bit to get these guys to back down. It's just that they've insulated themselves so much, you know?
And I think what this also gets at is in the inevitable downfall of these types of guys is that they win, but then they need to like stamp down even harder.
Mm-hmm.
Like he gets them to break up.
Yeah.
But then he's like, that little prick musician talked to me like that. Can't have that. Get him to get his ass kicked by the cops. And Tony's like, you won.
Yeah.
Like, why are you... Who cares about some fucking random blues musician? Like, you won. It's like, no, not enough. Gotta hurt him. Can't talk to me like that. Nope. And that is the inevitable fucking downfall for both of these guys, because Tony Curtis just wants his column, and Burt Lancaster has to show how big of a dick he is. He loses his sister. The sister finally grows up and says, enough of this. I'm done. Tony Curtis,
because
he just can't. Like, it's these guys, like, they get that power, and I like that the movie never really tells you how he got to this level of power. You just accept that he got there. Although there's like the way he gets defensive in the beginning over saying, "Oh, what, you think I need a press agent to do my work?" It's like, okay, so I wonder how legitimate it was you getting to this position. The way you were so like, "Oh, what, you think I need Tony Curtis, you little fucking senator prick?" These guys, it's like they can't just win; they have to fucking carpet bomb the region.
Well, it's beyond. I mean, even beyond that, like, you want to talk about the contemporary. I mean, obviously, like, some of this too is like we're talking about power brokers, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about, and I mean, you know, again, what Robert Caro wrote about when he was talking about Robert Moses. Like, this was a guy who knew how to wield power, right?
Yeah.
He knew how to wield power, but when he started getting vindictive, at the people who threatened him, he would overplay his hand, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what ultimately undid him. Was like, it took Nelson Rockefeller to take him down, because Nelson Rockefeller was like the first guy to really kind of go, "Ah, fuck you, shut up." You know, and also to be in a position where he's like, "I don't need you." You know, talk about politics now, or the contemporary thing. You know, one of the things that's been interesting to witness over the last couple of months, and I am going to draw a comparison to J.J. Hunsaker here, even though not a dignified person in any way, but we're going to talk about media personality who has their own show and has a surprising amount of influence. You know who I'm talking about. Who am I going to say, Tom?
Show me those fat monkeys.
I'll fight you all. So Alex Jones.
Show me those fat monkeys. Hey, Kyle.
But
Google fat monkeys.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
That's the stuff.
So Alex Jones, in the world of like Alex Jones and InfoWars right now, an interesting thing is happening insofar as this was a guy who, you know, for all intents and purposes, for a very long time, this guy had basically consolidated all power in the like freak conspiracy space. Right? And it's a thing that people don't really know about, or young people maybe don't understand, is that the reason he was able to gain power, the reason he was able to gain cachet, is not to, oh God, Kyle is actually sending you fat monkeys, Tom, in the chat.
Oh my God, that is a fat fuck. I love him.
Kyle, you're going to have to save that one so I can put it in the video for people. Anyway, no, but like Alex Jones gained his foothold by being seemingly in like 2006, he had this vantage point of like, no, I call out all sides, because unlike all the other guys, unlike the Rush Limbaughs, unlike all those people, Alex Jones didn't support the George W. Bush administration, right? He was anti the Iraq War. He was anti all that stuff. And so it didn't look like he carried water for any politician. It didn't look like for the people who became his fans, it looked like he had an objective, he was a principle driven guy, right?
Yeah.
Now, he was not and is not, to be clear, but he made himself out to be, right? The same way that, like, in this film, a J.J. Hunsaker does make himself out to be like, listen, I'm just looking out for everyone's interests, and I just, I'm Mr. Principled, right? And then what has happened, particularly in the last year or so, is that internally you are seeing this real rebellion against him from the conspiracy freak group, because, whereas Jones had previously, again, wielded all this power as, listen, I'm the guy that's going to call out the globalists and the deep state and all that. Now, in the last year especially, and it's been happening for years, but in the last year especially, he's been carrying water for the current administration, right?
Yep.
And this guy who told you that, they had all this seedy stuff going on in Bohemian Grove, and the government is run by a cabal of pedophiles, is now going, the Epstein list, that's not really a big deal. Donald Trump, he was just, he was just there hanging out. Don't worry about it. And then on top of that, like, the thing of when that guy, when the guy with the gun got shot by ICE, right? Guy who was lawfully carrying a firearm, did not discharge it. Yeah. And here's Alex Jones, a guy who was basically psychologically torturing Sandy Hook parents, because he's like, listen, I don't give a damn. I just got to protect the Second Amendment. That's all I'm about. Now he shows himself as like, well, that's what's going to happen when you carry a gun. It's like all of those ideas of like the principles you say you stood for, right? And all that's gone. And he's losing his cachet with these people. And now a lot of these guys, again, a lot of the younger weird alt-right people, they're going to Nick Fuentes, right? Or they're going to Candace Owens, right? Yep. Who are the people who are now positioning themselves as the I don't have an agenda crowd, which of course they do. I'm not suggesting they don't, to be clear, but the people who are like, well, you know what? I'm actually going to criticize the administration. I'm going to say that they're going against the things I believe in, or XYZ. They're going to those people. I mean, it's to the point now where recently a guy who quit InfoWars, Owen Schroyer, just had Alex's son on his own show, and they were both kind of shit-talking Alex. That's how much his power has diminished, right? And it's like J.J. Hunsaker in this, insofar as what Tony Curtis says to him. He's like, you lost her forever, right? You lost your sister forever. That's done. J.J. Hunsaker doesn't disappear tomorrow because of that. He's still going to have his column. He's still going to have that. But you have people who used to admire him, used to fear him, who are now unafraid to speak out against him, right? And that's where the downfall comes in. And it may not be fast. It may not be pronounced the same way. I don't think you can turn around and necessarily go like, oh, well, this was the day that Walter Winchell lost influence, right? The same way you can't say, oh, this was the day Rush Limbaugh lost influence, right? There's not we all thought there was going to be a single day where Alex Jones went to court. The court said, you've got to sell your site and all that, and you need to stop making content. And that was going to be the moment when, we took down the great evil. And instead, it's just a slow burn into total irrelevance, you know?
And I think, excuse me, I think a smart thing that this movie does with regards to that idea of it is of eventually he's going to lose all of his power and cachet, even if it's not, the next day, is that his sort of second wave attack on the guitarist and then the attack on Tony Curtis, it's all very sloppy. Like, this is all stuff that even in the 50s, like, this is, it'll come out, like, even if he doesn't get arrested for it, it will start getting around to people like, oh wait, this guy just like had his sister's boyfriend beat by they'll put the pieces together, and then his press agent got beat up for actually having the weed. It's like, well, this is weird. Like, so then like those little doubts will start creeping in when people start reading his stuff and whatnot. And then you also got to think, even in the 50s, maybe a guy like that dirty cop gets, pinched for something, and he's like, hey, I can tell you some stuff.
And even if
none of his operation is clean.
Even if it doesn't come out then, right?
Yeah,
even
that's
if it doesn't come out even if it doesn't come out until the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even if J.J. Hunsaker is long dead, right? Yeah. The thing he wanted was power, right?
Yeah.
And
not even just power. He wanted respect.
Yeah.
And the way he reacts to the way they bring up press agents and the way he gets so like uppity about it, and the way he responds to the guitarist, and just the way he treats the senator and the manager of the girl that's with the senator. Like, he's got this, like, if it wasn't Burt Lancaster, you'd say a Napoleonic complex, because Burt Lancaster is built like a brick shit house. But he's got this thing like, I not only want respect, I demand respect. And if you don't give me respect, I'm going to fucking ruin you. And maybe in this guy's mind, what he sees as respect, we see as fear. But it's all just, it's this desperate ploy for respect. And he wants to hold on to that as hard as he can. And he, psychosexually puts that shit onto his sister. It all just is going to, this almost feels like the story we're watching is the inevitable downfall. Like you said, it wasn't a day, but like, if you 20,000 feet view of it, like your God watching your little ants running over this little shitty hill that he created, you could be like, oh, this is when JJ fucked everything up. This is when things started going downhill for him.
And, it's interesting because there's so much within the character of J.J. Hunsaker. By the way, I want to just do a quick shout out to the podcast Knowledge Fight, which goes through all of Alex Jones's show and makes fun of what a dum-dum he is. I want to give that shout out because I want to make sure anybody listening now understands the reason I know all this stuff about Alex Jones is from that podcast. I do not actively listen or pay any attention to what Alex Jones does.
You do need to clarify that.
I really
need to clarify that, because you do look the way you do, and you do live in Long Island.
Yeah.
You do need to clarify these things.
I know so much about all the weird freaks in that ancillary universe, and it feels weird because nobody else does. Nobody I want to talk to knows about these people, and it's very upsetting. But no, to go to a different direction, we don't actually get that much of a sense of J.J. Hunsaker's writing either.
No.
Right? We know two things. We know the one thing that he says praising that comedian, which is just a genuine, like, I thought this guy was funny, that Tony Curtis uses to manipulate him, which is another moment I love. Yeah. But the other one we get is when he's preparing for his show and he's preparing to defend the boyfriend, and he's making this grandiose speech about America, right? And we need democracy and all that. And it made me think about the fact that, like, here he is, he's counseling senators. He's making speeches about democracy. It made me think about nothing in this 97-minute movie tells us that J.J. Hunsaker ever tried to run for political office or ever wanted to, but you get the sense he did, or at least he's thinking about it, or he would want, he won't admit to himself he wants it or whatever. And it made me think about, again, I keep using the term power broker. It made me think about Robert Moses in the Robert Caro biography, which is like Robert Moses figured out how to use his role in the Parks Department, a department job that nobody gave a shit about, how he used that to wield enormous power, right?
Yep.
And get so much good press. He was beloved, right? In all of his press, people loved him. The public showed up to cheer for him. They would do presentations where school children would sing, "Thank you, Mr. Moses." So he got it in his head, well, I'm so beloved, I'm going to run for political office, right?
Yeah.
He ran in only one election. He lost horrendously, and everybody hated him during the campaign. And I kept thinking about that with Hunsaker in terms of like, he's got this grandiosity. He's doing these speeches about democracy and all of that, but he can only do that when he controls the circumstances, right? He can only do that when nobody is allowed to ask questions of him or do anything to disturb him. Once he faces any real competition, once he has to be unguarded and available to people, they would hate him.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, not that Hunsaker or, Charles Foster Kane has kind of the same thing, right? He does run for office and goes poorly. And people hate him. It's a similar thing. I think, somebody like a J.J. Hunsaker benefits from the fact that he was able to construct this world where it's again, Robert Moses was one of these guys where, like, and I'm going to get some of the details wrong, but like, he basically finagled it so that his position with the Parks Department couldn't be replaced when a new administration came in, even though all the other positions could. And he made it that way because it could be like, well, now I have power.
Yeah.
Now you don't get to say whether I do or don't do the thing that I do. In a sense, and I know I'm taking us back to something we talked about an hour ago, but like the exact archetype of a J.J. Hunsaker, like a gossip monger, a respected gossip monger, that doesn't exist in our modern world, but a power broker type does exist, even if it is in different sort of microcosms, right? I think that's, yeah. Well, I want to take a second, by the way, a little trivia that I discovered, because we were talking around certain things. We talked about Alexander McKendrick, UK-based director, right? Mm-hmm. UK-based director who did these great Ealing comedies, The Lady Killers, The Man in the White Suit. But in order to learn about New York, this is just a little trivia that I thought was so fascinating. In order to learn about New York, he was allowed to travel to New York to learn about the city. And what he would do is he brought a camera with him, still photography camera, spun around in a circle, photographing a circle, and then taped the photographs to the wall of his office so that he could figure out what angles worked and what didn't when filming New York City streets. And so that's why he opts for the moving camera. That's why the New York City stuff does have that, verite feeling. Is he was very obsessed with, like, how do I capture the energy of New York City streets?
I love the energy of New York in this movie, and I love this era of seeing New York on film and photography or in motion pictures or whatever. There's just something about it, and I think this movie gets that vibe, which is because when we think of New York, we tend to think of the grimy 70s, 80s New York as the sort of, or at least like the 70s, 80s, where it was basically two halves: grimy shit-ass New York and then Woody Allen's New York. Mm-hmm. And we tend to think of that. Or we tend to think of it now, the super gentrified, no personality, just purgatory that exists as it is now. But what I love about the feeling that this movie gets is that there was the period before everything went to hell, where the city had personality, it was sleazy and there was crime, but it wasn't like it was going to be. It was still a place you could go into Manhattan, you could go to these clubs, you could go to a movie theater or whatever, and yeah, it was still a kind of shitty, sleazy place, whatever. But it wasn't hell on earth. It was just a city with whatever the census was at the time, 2 million people. Still a lot of people. There's going to be crime, but it isn't a fucking haven of monstrosity. It's that middle ground between 70s New York and now New York. But somehow it came before 70s New York. And it's just that in-between feeling that really it's just the nostalgia for a time we've never lived in, because all we've really had is the New York that's basically started bleeding out personality when we were born and has become less and less the city we were told New York was through parents' stories, grandparents' stories, the movies, the books, whatever. And this is like such a prime, fertile, interesting looking city of there's buildings, but we're not skyscrapered out yet.
The Father Duffy statue has nothing around it.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
But you still got the neon lights all down the city streets, so it's like the city's still growing, but it's not there yet. So there's still that elements of like the early 1900s around, but we're bringing in all the new stuff, the movie theaters, the nightclubs, the neon lights, all the celebrity, all the fucking nonsense, and this sort of like PR push of, oh, this is the place to be, where if you're a high society guy, you're a guy that knows things, that can do things, that can push a button on somebody, you come down here. And man, it's just, and yeah, like McKendrick, and with obviously the god tier work James Wong Howe does as the DP on this movie, shooting on location, not a very typical thing in 1950s American cinema. Just absolutely just brings the fucking heat on this movie and makes it one of the quintessential New York movies. Do you remember that book I got, Fun City Cinema?
Of course, yeah. You've brought it up on the show several times.
This movie is the movie that is the focal point of the 1950s chapter of that book. I mean, like, rightly so. Like, in every chapter they talk about a bunch of movies, but it's like, this is the movie that all these other movies sprinkle down. You see, like, what the city's looking at. And this is like what he's sort of getting at in that movie of like, this is this sort of transition period for New York. And it's really like, like we've talked about many times that filmmaking is capturing history in a bottle and being able to see life as it used to be, even if it was fictionalized. We're seeing New York the way it was in the 50s in a way we really don't get a lot of, and it's intoxicating, man. It's just, there's nothing like it. Even like the best produced movie now that's set in the 50s won't be able to get the same vibe that this movie does. Marty Supreme comes close because it's set in the same period, but it's not the same exact vibe. And you know, it's Westerns don't get the same vibe as Westerns. It's like, well, that's nature, and as gorgeous as it is, that's what we're seeing is the human experiment in such an interesting moment. And I don't know, maybe it's the New York boy in me that just makes it so like I can't look away from this kind of stuff, but I just love seeing the evolution / de-evolution of New York as an entity beyond just a piece of land. You know?
And a big part of that too, beyond the visuals, is the sound. Like, I want to make sure we talk about right from the jump this hits you with that. I mean, there's an Elmer Bernstein score.
Yeah,
there's an Elmer Bernstein score, but I really want to talk about the Chico Hamilton Quintet, their music, the jazz score that they provided for this. It's an incredible score, and I have great news for you, Tom. As the show continues, this will not be the last time you hear the Chico Hamilton Quintet.
Well, I'm happy about that.
So let's talk about this for a second. So again, the Chico Hamilton Quintet, they were in a lot of films, surprisingly. So obviously, there's a version of the quintet in Sweet Smell of Success, but also a couple years later, a version of the quintet appears in Jazz on a Summer's Day, set at the Newport Jazz Festival, which is also in the National Film Registry.
Okay.
Later, the group kind of in the early 60s got a revamp, the quintet, to become to play chamber jazz with a modern avant-gardism. And they would. This is a cool little thing that I did not really know about, and I think this is awesome. They in 1962 recorded a soundtrack for the industrial film Litho, which I have not been able to find a copy of. But Litho, 1962, is the first American film to ever be shown behind the Iron Curtain.
Oh.
So, even at the height of the Cold War, the Soviets got a hit of that Hamilton quintet. Hamilton
it knows no bounds. Knows no boundaries. No lines in the
Hamilton would, in the mid-'60s, form a film and commercial production company and went on to score a range of films, including Repulsion, the Polanski film.
Okay.
Here's a weird one. Coonskin, the Ralph Bakshi film.
I feel like you shouldn't be saying that word on screen.
And also Gerald McBoing, the Oscar-winning animated cartoon. So he's had, like, Hamilton Quintet, wild career. Very cool. And, like, I don't know about you, Tom. I don't know if you had this experience rewatching it, but I feel like every time I watch it, and I fired it up yesterday, and like the score hits from the jump, and you just kind of get this feeling of like, oh right, this score is phenomenal.
It just
kind
hooks
of forget
you from the jump.
Yeah,
and it's I keep bringing them up because I'm looking at the fucking disc in my face, so I'm thinking of Safdie's. But like watching it today, I was thinking of Safdie stuff, and just that immediate hooking you in. You watching Good Time or Uncut Gems or Marty, like they start with like the sounds of the city, this amazing soundtrack hitting you and just dragging you along for this epic journey of misanthropy and just mistake, just through New York, a New York that only exists in their eyes anymore, and it's fucking electric. Also, very funny that the score is by Elmer Bernstein, who would one of those guys of that era, did a lot of work, all of that, and then later in life became one of Landis's guys.
Mm-hmm.
The score for Ghostbusters.
Yep. Another great New York film. I wanted to just highlight that. We could obviously, go on, but I wanted to just make sure we called out that score.
The score is great. The cinema. This is a movie where like you could legitimately say it's a perfect movie.
Yeah.
Because no movie's really perfect, especially if you talk to people nowadays where every movie needs to be about everything. And, I'm sorry, Sweet Smell of Success doesn't talk about the Native American genocide. It's a mistake on the Kendricks part. They should have known. They also should have talked about the, Latin American diaspora. But, there's only so much time you can in a 95-minute movie.
In a 97-minute movie, yeah.
About J.J. Hunsaker wanting to fuck his sister. Which is...
big influence to Palma Scarface, I guess.
Honestly, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, he's basically got similar glasses that I think Tony Montana wears at points in the movie. The sister stuff is something that I, watching it before, talking about the way it's able to dance around things because of the time, but also because of the way Odette is writing it and is just throwing you in. So it's just, you gotta have to pick the pieces up as you go. I like that they don't tell you much about the sister, but you just get the sense of, oh, she's always been like a nervous, rattled kid. But watching it this time, you really get the sense, all right, she's probably come close to threatening, killing herself before, based on the way Curtis reacts to her doing it. It's like, oh, all right, Jesus Christ, we're doing this fucking spiel again. But then her doing it, you get the sense, all right, maybe she almost came close at one point, but I also like, because they can't tell you because of the era, but also like the writing, I got the sense that she was probably a drug addict and she's trying to get clean. She's been clean for a while. And it like living with JJ probably made her a nervous wreck. She probably, like a lot of women in the 50s, were given meth. And she probably had, and you know, the emotional issues, you see how hard she takes losing the guitarist, and that her immediate reaction is, I'm gonna jump out of a fucking window. I was just getting the feeling like, I think this girl has had a very troubled life in a way that JJ doesn't honestly want to engage in, and his control is maybe his way of being like, I know she's got issues, probably because of me. I'm not going to admit what those issues are. I'm going to say it's this jerk off guitarist's fault. And just this weird Oedipal thing of, he made the problems, but he wants to fix the problems, but he's making it worse. And he's clearly like fucking 30 years older than his sister. So you're like, well, what's going on here?
That's an interesting read, because I see what you're saying, right? Like, I fully do.
Like, it's
to
not.
Me,
I'm not saying it's there. I'm just.
No, I'm not saying you are. No, I'm legitimately saying I think that's an interesting read. To me, what I feel there is, and we're not going to name any names. We are not going to name any names, but we've all been in situations. It's particularly a thing when you get into a relationship, when you're dating, whether it's like when you're in high school or when you're an adult or whatever. We've all been in situations where, like, you get involved with somebody, and then they kind of go like, oh, let me take you home and meet the family, or let me introduce you to my group of friends, or whatever. And you immediately clock, there's an unhealthy dynamic here, right? Yeah. Like, there's a person who has insulated themselves from criticism. There's a person who has all the power, right? That kind of thing, where you look at that, you clock that, right? And part of what ends up endearing the person you're seeing, or whoever that may be, to you more, is that you become the first person who tells them, hey, this isn't okay. Yeah. Right? When you're dealing with somebody, and obviously, like, Hunsaker is a brother, not a father, but, when you're dealing with something where you go and you're just like, you sit there and go like, hey, your dad or your mom or your grandma or whoever it is, like, nobody tells them no, and they are way too controlling, and that's not normal. If you're the first person to kind of vocalize that, right, it creates this friction, it creates this tension, and I think, I wonder if, to some degree or another, what you're saying about her being nervous, the sister being a nervous type, absolutely. I wonder if some of it and some of the relationship is like, if maybe from the beginning, the boyfriend, Tommy, is just kind of like, yeah, this guy ain't shit. Like, I don't need to fucking listen to him. And like, what a fucking breakthrough that is. And then that makes it make sense for why she acts the way it does, because it takes a hell of a lot for somebody in that situation to say, I don't know if this is working. You see it again, and it can be family, it can be friendships, it can be all kinds of stuff. But it's like, and then maybe it takes a certain type of personality or whatever it is. I don't know. But, there is something very powerful. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than like one person just walking into a situation and going, why are you still friends with her? I don't understand why you want to be friends with this person, and that can cause this snowball effect, and that's what Hunsaker finds so threatening.
Oh, I think all of that's there. There's just the way they keep basically intimating that this is how she's always been.
Yeah.
And it just feels like, because I don't know, I can't really explain it other than just like the little hints they drop and the way she acts and the way, I don't know, like it just gets the feeling of she's probably dealt with emotional issues her whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Suicide may not have been a first time thing for her. Maybe just threatened before this point, but this is definitely something that at least Tony Curtis has had to deal with on her end. And just, I don't know, that nervous energy always translates to me that there's probably some sort of, especially in the 50s where there is no like therapy really, and there's no like antidepressant meds. So like when you see somebody that like jittery and that on edge and that willing to throw themselves out a window because she can't get away from her brother, and her brother got a fucking boyfriend beat the shit out of by the cops, I just was like, especially within a world this sleazy. I mean, we've got Tony Curtis pimping out a cigarette girl. All this just like horrible, like these people are all just horrible.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, I wouldn't be surprised if this girl has or had and is now dealing with it through an actual loving relationship with Tommy, a drug problem to help deal with her nerves. I don't know. It just felt to me, especially, I guess maybe it's the Safdie thing. I was like, oh, maybe she's got a little heaven knows what in her, and they sort of like looked at that. But I was just like, I could see this being a thing of like maybe this is a backstory we don't have.
I also do very much like the idea of, I think when I've read some comments on this film, like I think some people, I would argue, I think some people read a little too into the Tony Curtis relationship with the sister, where like there are some people who are like, well, clearly, you know, Tony Curtis is also in love with
that's no
with JJ's sister.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't go that far, but what I do feel, right, is up until that night, right? Up until the night of the suicide, maybe there is a part of his brain that's just like, look, these boys that she's palled around with, that, you know, JJ's always dispensed with, it's because they weren't good for her, because they would rock the boat, right? Mm-hmm. She needs a good guy who is not going to rock the boat. And, you know, I think maybe he's in the headspace like, you know, if JJ turned around to me and was like, hey, I think you'd be a good match with my sister, I'd be like, I'd give it the old college try. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where his head is at, enough that when Lancaster turns around to him and is like, you put your hands on my sister, that's a tipping point for Curtis, because that is what causes him to realize, oh, this was never about you don't like the kind of boy she's seeing. This was never about you don't like a boy who's going to rock the boat, because you also don't like me. You are also really upset at the idea of her with me, and you know I'm not a boat rocker. You know I'll do whatever you say. So now it's apparent to me that this is never about this girl's happiness. You know, I think up until that point, Tony Curtis was of the belief that, like, what I am doing and what JJ is doing is for this girl's good. And now he realizes it wouldn't matter. Hunsecker's going to do what Hunsecker does anyway, because he wants that control and he wants her all to himself. But with that being said, on a final note, Tom, winding down as we always do, this will be an easy one, I know, but winding down as we always do, how do you think Sweet Smell of Success did at the Academy Awards that year?
Nothing. Goose egg.
Big old 0. Do you want to venture a guess at either the picture nominees or winners from that year?
That is just, no, I can't do that.
Okay. It's an interesting lineup. It's actually a very interesting lineup. It's a very good year. The best picture nominees that year were 12 Angry Men,
okay,
Peyton Place, Sayonara, Witness for the Prosecution,
oh hell yeah,
and the winner, The Bridge on the River Kwai.
Fuck, that's like 3 fucking nukes.
That's a good ass lineup. Like, Peyton Place obviously like hasn't aged as well. And I'm not putting Sayonara on the same level as those other 3, but you should watch Sayonara. It's worth checking out.
But even still, like 3 of those movies are nukes. Those are
absolutely
absolute fucking heavyweights. Holy shit.
And I think it's interesting to contrast particularly 12 Angry Men with Sweet Smell of Success, because Sweet Smell of Success is like, is essentially like one man with power, right? And 12 Angry Men is like one man can make a difference. So really interesting to see them in contrast.
And vital New York movies.
Yeah. So that is that for Sweet Smell of Success. Everybody else, stick around. Everybody, I guess. There is no else.
Yeah, don't hit pause, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Stick around, because guess what's going to happen? We're going to be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry. And then after that, in a week, we'll be right back with our final film of the season, an episode we're definitely recording after this. And
definitely recording after this, and it will definitely still be a world where the Strait of Hormuz is open.
It's open. Hasn't been in the can for so long that I'm not confident we say things that we should say on that episode. Deeply afraid we might endorse some canceled people on that.
Oh, well, I mean, that's almost a guarantee.
All right, but anyway, for right now, stick around. We'll be back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members like Martin Scorsese, Alfre Woodard, and Leonard Maltin, and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and us, who can submit their nominations for the registry in a form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of each episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration, on behalf of You're Missing Out. Here are today's picks.
So we were talking about how many films this movie influenced, and one that I kept thinking of, and I didn't bring up during the episode because I knew I was going to talk about it here, is a film that, if Sweet Smell of Success is discussing one of the corrupting forces of New York in the 1950s, right? It's focused on the entertainment industry. It's focused on the gossip columns, focused on all that. And this kind of black rotting heart in New York, and trying to take that down. There's a film in the 80s that does something similar for another aspect of New York. And sort of much like, honestly, the fact that Sweet Smell of Success, well, maybe the Walter Winchell type is gone, but the darkness at the heart of it is still around and omnipresent. So too with this film. I'm talking about another film that is about, an older guy, an older charismatic guy who gives a remarkable performance, and his younger sort of protege who is trying to figure out whether or not he really wants to sell his soul to fit into this world. I am talking about Oliver Stone's Wall Street. Oliver Stone's Wall Street, a film that has sort of, I think it's definitely lost some of its prominence in pop culture in a way that, like, that was considered one of the great films, I think, when we were growing up. And I don't know if it's watched the same way. Maybe that's because of the way that the stock market has, or our relationship with the stock market has changed. Maybe it's a very 80s film. I don't know, but I highly recommend people revisit it. Or if you haven't seen it before, see it for the first time, because holy shit, does Gordon Gekko just feel like the explanation for why everything is the way it is now. It's stellar performance from Michael Douglas, Oscar-winning performance from Michael Douglas as Gordon Gekko, and that phenomenally great is good speech. But it's also like Wall Street does capture New York at a certain time. And, Tom was talking about this idea of the two different sides of New York, the sleazy side and also like the Woody Allen rich person side. And Wall Street is the movie that really captures both sides of that in one. It manages to make the rich, shiny side of New York still feel deeply and profoundly sleazy, right? That the crooks have stopped being the guys in Times Square trying to get you into a porno theater, and they are the guys making millions on their cell phones at their beach houses. It is it both popularizes and almost designs an archetype that we recognize, even if the film isn't seen as much anymore, in everything from American Psycho to Wolf of Wall Street. And it just, so much of Oliver Stone's film echoes into today. You kind of can't understand America now and can't understand America in the 80s. I mean, and again, if your idea of America in the 80s is Stranger Things or any of the like Goonies or Good Enough nostalgia, you need to understand that what kept that engine going and hurtled us into near oblivion with a failed economic system, it's what happens in Wall Street. So my pick for the registry, Oliver Stone's Wall Street.
All right, so this one kind of came pretty quickly for me. This one was easy. It's another cynical, arsenic-laced, cookie-filled journalistic descent into the underbelly of what goes into the media landscape, into a specific kind of media landscape, the subcultures that exist within the journalistic worlds. I'm going across country to the Pacific. I'm a great LA movie, one of the great just movies in general of the 2010s, one of the best unheralded performances that should have gotten a bunch of nominations and if not a win. I'm talking about Tony Gilroy's Nightcrawler, the movie with Jake Gyllenhaal as the skinniest little bastard you've ever seen in your life, who is like Tony Curtis in this movie mixed with fucking like Travis Bickle, mixed with Patrick Bateman, just trying to get into this weird little world of recording crime scenes for the local news and using that to gain power and sort of respect and whatnot. And it really is a great successor to Sweet Smell of Success. It is just as well written, just as well directed. It does a lot of similar things with giving you enough but not telling you every little thing about the characters of the world they inhabit or where they were before or whatnot. It's very dark. This one actually, has the benefit of not being released during the Hays Code, so it could be even more nihilistic and cynical than Sweet Smell of Success, which is a feat in and of itself. I think they're just the perfect double feature of how such an important institution can be cancerous and metastasized into something horrible, and how horrible people can latch on to that and turn that into their own personal gain. Not something we're dealing with recently, because we've only recorded this a week ago. The Strait of Hormuz is still open. Nothing bad has happened. Paramount is still Paramount. Warner Brothers is still Warner Brothers. Everything is fine. So my pick is Nightcrawler. Kill me now.
You're Missing Out is a production of Neon Night Media. It's hosted by Mike Natale and Tom Lorenzo. The show is produced by Kaya Lampar and edited by Mike Natale and Kaya Lampar. More information about our hosts and guests are in the show notes. Thank you to Amanda Rush for our social media, and all of you for checking us out.
If you're listening right now or want to take the show on the go, every episode is available as an audio podcast. Follow You're Missing Out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please leave a review and a rating. It helps folks find the show.
Want to watch the show or watch some of the films along with us? Great, that's why we're doing this. Don't leave us alone out here. Check out our YouTube channel. We've got video versions of every episode, uploads of some of the National Film Registry titles we're discussing, commentary tracks, and live streams. And once a month, I'll be uploading some content that's exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to click subscribe and hit that little bell to be notified as soon as new stuff goes up. Because, let's be fucking real, I ain't sticking to a goddamn schedule.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
And you'll see us next time. Because we don't watch you, you're watching us.